All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. You're watching 7 Gen Live. I'm really excited for today's show. Just want to say good afternoon. I hope you guys had a great week. And I am Jillian Wan. I also have my co-host here, Mike Prate, with me. And what's up, Mike? I just want to see what you've been up to because you haven't been on Facebook. So what's up?
I haven't been on Facebook. I probably have like hundreds of unread things, not even because I'm popular, just like spam. People just ask me stuff. I've been good. Decided we had talked like right after New Year's about, like not resolutions, but like things you wanted to do. So my check-in so far, I actually have been doing a little bit of little workouts during the week, so that's exciting. I don't hit them all the time, but most of the time, so a little more active. And then I dropped off Facebook. I don't know, it just was taking a lot of energy, and what I really found the most out of anything like was I would notice when I'd be hanging out with Willow that I would like pick up my phone and start messing around for literally no reason. So this has been a good move for me. Spending a lot of time with baby girl. She's getting so big and like funny and fun to be around. She like makes cool faces and knows that she's making a joke. So life's been good over here. Busy, but all good. How about you? What you been up to?
Yeah, everything's been good. I always want to tell people that you have a new baby, but she's not new anymore. I mean, time has gone by so quickly. So I'm always seeing Margaret pictures and I'm like, oh, Mike has the cutest baby. I always think like you're so lucky. But I've been really good. Oh my gosh, I thought I turned my phone off. Sorry. But I've been really good. I've been trying to focus on my new goals for the new year, and we created a fitness page on Facebook. So a lot of people here in the community we've been doing this push-up challenge, and it ended up kind of blowing up. So it's been really cool to see everybody posting their push-ups every day. So that really motivated me, and I finally started working out again because ever since pandemic, man, I just stopped working out. But yeah, so that's what's going on in my life. And again, I'm really excited for today's episode. We're actually going to cover quite a few topics, but it's going to be a pretty free-flowing conversation, as it always is. We're going to discuss what it's like to be a nurse working through the pandemic. And like many of our previous shows, we always talk about the importance of knowing your identity. We're also going to discuss the new COVID vaccine for today's episode. I just want to put it out there that we're not trying to persuade anybody's decision in getting the vaccine or not. This is just an episode to help inform you guys, give you some good knowledge. That way you could feel a lot safer and more confident about your decision in getting the vaccine or not. But I think the getting the vaccine here has been open to the public now. I mean, it rolled out very quickly, and even though some of us have gotten our vaccine and some of us haven't, I think we all have the same questions, and I guess you could say maybe some of us have some trust issues. But that's why I'm really excited to have an Indigenous perspective on this topic today. So with that being said, I just want to welcome our amazing guest. Her name is Cali Wolf. She is also Sichangu Lakota. She's an ER nurse. She's a blogger. She has a very informative Instagram page, and she's also the coordinating director of Native Women's Wilderness, excuse me. So Cali, go ahead and come on.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today for this discussion.
Thank you for being here today. We'd love for you to just start off by introducing yourself and just telling us more about you.
Yeah, so my name is Cali Wolf, and I am Sichangu Lakota, and I was adopted as a newborn, and I was born in the Black Hills in Rapid City, and I grew up most of my life in Illinois in the Chicago suburbs, which was kind of a unique experience growing up that I'll kind of get into further. And I am an ER nurse. I've been a nurse for 9 years now. 8 of those years have been in emergency medicine, which is my passion. And I'm also a mother. I have a daughter, Rhea. She's 18 months old now. So I totally relate to you, Mike, about those cute baby faces and all the new stages that they go through. It's just really such an exciting time of my life to be lucky enough to be her mother. I currently live in Denver, Colorado. I've been out here for 5 years with my husband, and we were just drawn to the area for the accessibility to the outdoors. You know, growing up in the Chicago suburbs, I felt pretty claustrophobic and kind of landlocked by all the buildings and highways and urban feel of it all. And coming out here was just really a breath of fresh air, and it taught me a lot about myself, and it's helped me connect to who I really am. I feel more like myself than I ever have. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. And before the show, you also mentioned that you've been to St. Francis plenty of times. So you've been here to the Rosebud Sioux tribe, right?
Yeah, my dad grew up in St. Francis. And so we would come visit my family. Hi to any of my family that is watching this right now, because they are so supportive and said they were going to. So we, visited every year to visit my grandma, who has since passed away. And then as an adult, I have made a few trips by myself to visit my uncle, who has also unfortunately since passed away. And we came out with Native Women's Wilderness in January of 2019. I'm the coordinating director, like you mentioned before, and part of that role is helping establish relationships with our own communities. And so our founder, Jalen, she is Navajo. So, between her and I, our main focuses have been Navajo Nation and Rosebud. So we were able to do a community fundraiser for a couple of the organizations out there, White Buffalo Calf, Women's Society, and the Children's Home. So we were able to come out and kind of meet with those organizations, visit with my family, and my friends were able to go to the Badlands, which they'd never been to before. So I do somewhat know the area. I have family there on both sides, my adoptive family and my biological families. So love going to the fair, the Rosebud Fair. I was hoping to take my daughter, this past year, but, COVID pandemic kind of put all of our plans on hold. So maybe next year, if not the year after that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the world almost ended here when there was no Rosebud Fair last year.
Oh, yeah, so I can imagine.
Hopefully next year. But can you talk a little bit about Native Women's Wilderness? What is that exactly?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit that was founded about 3 years ago now. And being out in the Denver area, there's a lot of outdoor recreation and opportunities, but we don't see ourselves as Native women really represented in these realms. And that's not to say that we're not participating in these activities and these hobbies. We are out there skiing, we're out there hiking, we're out there backpacking and camping, and we just wanted to bring some representation of Indigenous people, women and non-binary relatives specifically, to this industry that is predominantly white and male. So we initially started just to kind of inspire other Indigenous women to pursue these activities. And since we've grown and we've been able to sponsor Native women to pursue further education, such as like wilderness first responders, and also to participate in things like the Ironman or educational trips on how to learn how to backpack. So it's really just become a really tight-knit community. We participate in the semi-annual outdoor retailer event, which is a large event held in Denver with all sorts of sponsors like the North Face, REI, and also our nonprofit community organized groups like Native Women's Wilderness, Natives Outdoors, Indigenous Women Hike, Latinos outdoors, and all sorts of different, communities of color who are participating in this realm.
That is awesome. It sounds like such a cool group to be a part of, and I love the idea of kind of like you mentioned, it's not like Indigenous people, Indigenous women aren't doing these things, just not being represented. How many when you talk about Native Women Wilderness, how many like members or how does the organization or the group work in that way?
So we have Jalen, who's our founder, and then we've been growing every year. We have about 10 ambassadors from across the country, across Turtle Island. And something that I forgot to mention, which is kind of at the core of our value, is to educate the outdoor industry and others on the ancestral lands that we are on, and our history with this land, because a lot of times you'll see people going to national parks, and when you think about like Yosemite, you're never told about the Indigenous history there, even the Badlands. So a lot of it is making people aware that these are Indigenous lands. We have Indigenous communities that were removed from these lands, and a lot of times people aren't even aware of that. My dad told me a story of when he was driving back to Rosebud from Rapid City, and he thought he would take my mom through the Badlands and just show her, she'd never been there. And he pulls up to the station and they're like, okay, $20. And he's like, $20? I'm not going to pay you to go through my lands. And so it's just bringing awareness to that and helping educate and inform the public about what the history is with these lands and these parks.
That's a really interesting point too. Can going on that further, can you talk a little bit about what's your experience as an Indigenous person, Indigenous woman, specifically in Colorado? Because Colorado has a really interesting dynamic, right, of being this very progressive, very liberal, kind of like cool outdoorsy city, but at the same time really has an extremely violent and negative relationship with the Indigenous people that were there. You almost can't even find traces of it when you're in Colorado. It's shocking. Like, obviously racism in South Dakota very alive and well, but you can't deny the Indigenous presence. When I've been to Colorado, I've had a very different experience of really having a hard time finding that. What's been your experience in that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I grew up in this really small town in probably an hour west of Chicago. The population's like 17,000, and it's a predominantly white area. So growing up, I didn't have any Native friends. The only Native person I knew of was my dad. So going from that type of environment to a city like Denver, where there is a Native community, kind of did give me a different perspective. It definitely opened my eyes to my identity. I remember, and keep in mind, I'm like 26 when I moved, so I'm not young. I'm an adult at this point. So I remember texting my dad and saying, Dad, there's people like us here. And that was just, mind blowing to me. Having grown up in an area where, I was a token Native, the only Native person that people really knew. And so in a way, coming out here was definitely a huge part of developing my identity further and finding that community and realizing that there are people out here like me. There are people who moved here from Pine Ridge or from Rosebud, or there's people who, like me, were adopted and, in our mid 20s, early 30s, we're trying to figure out who am I and where do I fit into all of this. But like you mentioned, there is a lot of erasing and erasure that happens here. And a lot of people don't even realize what has happened on these lands. Like the Sand Creek Massacre happened like 2 hours east of Denver. And that was a significant event and massacre that happened so close to Denver. And, part of that was brought back to Denver. One of my really good friends, Sarah, she's also an ambassador with Native Women's Wilderness. She is Arapaho. So I've learned so much from her about the history of these lands and how they, had their encampment where Coors Field is right now, the baseball stadium for the Rockies. And this is stuff that you aren't going to learn just from being here in Denver. You're only going to hear that from somebody whose family lived through this. to pass on those stories. But I would say overall, coming from a background where I wasn't around other Indigenous people, coming out here has been good for me. It's been nice to be able to go to like the Denver March powwow. You know, where I came from, there was a yearly powwow, but that was mostly like a spectator event. It wasn't a community event. It was, you know, let's all go watch these Native people who are traveling through. And here it's just really a big community, and we have so many fun events surrounding that time. And just every weekend you can find a different powwow or community event. We even had the Lakota language consortium came down and did a weekend workshop. So I did that a couple years ago to kind of learn the, you know, beginner basics. And I wouldn't have necessarily had that opportunity had I been back in the Chicago area.
Good question, Mike. That was a really insightful answer too. Thank you, Callie. Also wanted to talk a little bit about your experience in being adopted and how that's played a role in knowing your identity as an Indigenous woman. Did you have any major mind shift changes throughout your life as you learn more about yourself and where you come from?
So I feel like I have a pretty unique experience with my adoption, since, you know, my biological family is from Rosebud, but so is my dad who adopted me. So I wasn't completely removed from the culture. I was definitely, you know, relocated to an area that didn't have much connection to culture or anything like that. So I didn't really experience what most adoptees reference, in that I still had that connection. I was still coming back to visit. And I'm not sure if you know who Sandy Whitehawk is, but she is amazing. And I just have really resonated with a lot that she talks about. Of course, our experiences were different, but she said something in the documentary Blood Memory that, you know, you go back to visit the res and it's like you're going back to visit your identity. And then you leave and you leave that part of you there. And sorry, I remember like as a young child, I like remember leaving my grandma's house every summer and just feeling that. Like I was too young to understand what that feeling was, what I was leaving. But I just really recall having a hard time leaving, and I'm having a hard time even talking about it because I'm just brought back to those memories and those good times with my family. But, you know, I'd say the majority of my identity struggles mainly come from the area that I grew up and just not being around other people like me. And I was on Instagram one day searching the hashtag Rosebud Sioux. And I found this page of this woman who, you know, seemed to be pretty similar to me. She lived in the DC metro area. She had family in Rosebud, you know, a Lakota woman. She identifies as a Native woman. And I just reached out to her, and, you know, I didn't have any Native friends at the time. So I reached out to her and I was like, hey, you know, I found your page searching hashtags, as weird as that is, but I would love to talk to you more and like find out how you have, you know, grown in your identity being somebody that lives in a metro area. And she's actually one of my best friends now. Her name is Jordan, brings three white horses, Daniel. And it's funny how I found her just through searching that hashtag, but I found similarities in our stories. And she was a big source of inspiration for me in knowing that, you know, I'm in my mid-20s, but I can still pursue this. It's not a part of me that's lost. And that's just been really helpful to me throughout these past 5 or so years in trying to figure out what my piece is in all of this, and how I can become a better Native woman.
That's an incredible story. Really powerful. So I can't help but think, having my wife is Alaskan Native. We met down here on Rosebud, and you know, have kind of made our life together down here, and our daughter was born last April, so she's just turned 9 months. And this is a conversation we've had a lot around, you know, what we want for her, and being able to connect with her biological family, my own, that's back in New York, her Alaska Native family, and heritage and culture, and the land and the foods and all the really important things up in, you know, Clayton, the villages up there, while at the same time kind of being surrounded by our Sichongu friends and family, you know, down here on Rosebud. How do you think your own experience of growing up is influencing the way you're thinking about, you know, raising your own child, and the things you want for her, or make sure that you want her to know, just given your own experience?
I think just having access to a community is really important. I know that when my mom and dad were preparing to adopt me, my mom worked at the university in human resources and development, and she spoke with a child psychologist there and asked him, you know, is this going to present an issue for her being raised away from her community? So my parents did everything that they possibly could have to make sure that I had a good outcome. But there's sometimes things that you don't anticipate. So, you know, that psychologist said, no, this is a great area to raise a family. She's going to be great. And I was great. And I had a great childhood. It's not something I really identified until I was older, how important that was to me. So as a parent, I've made the decision that I want to be somewhere that has a Native community that is accessible. And I really enjoy being here, specifically in Denver, because I am just a quick drive. I mean, it may not seem quick, but it's quick to Rosebud. So if I want to come out for the weekend, I can do so, and I can bring her up there to meet her family, and she'll grow up knowing Rosebud like I did. I think that was a really important part of growing up for me, was being able to go and visit and be around my family. And I really had this hope and dream of, you know, raising her at powwows and ceremonies from the moment she was born. But as we all know, the pandemic has put a halt on our plans for that for now. But I'm definitely hopeful that in the next year or so, we'll be able to resume going to these events safely and introducing her to the culture in that way.